The gospel writers tell us that John the Baptist, sent to prepare the people for the coming of Jesus, was acting according to Isaiah's prophetic summons: prepare the way of the Lord, straighten its crooked places, make it level. Sounds like a serious construction project to me. Also sounds like a good Western Pennsylvania construction project. Around here, folks know a thing or two about crooked roads. They know a thing or two about hilly roads. We've tried to tame our somewhat gnarly topography with bridges and tunnels, but we're still a long way from getting our roads straight or even reasonably level. We hear too often of vehicles failing to negotiate a curve. I love that expression, to negotiate a curve. Say, curve, how about I go around you this way? These kinds of crooked roads bear dire consequences. My own favorite public works project is Route 28. I don't have to say it more. For those of you visiting from another planet, Route 28 runs from the city northeast up past Katanning and into parts that haven't been adequately mapped yet. It's been under construction or reconstruction ever since I've been here. That's 21 years, and probably before that. I could go on about the time spent closely examining the surface of the median barrier while inching along, not to mention my running commentary on PennDOT planning. But that's not the point. We got roads like this, narrow, twisting, hilly roads, because they followed natural contours. So it's not our fault. We didn't pile up the hills or carve the rivers. Roads have only been here for the blink of the historical eye. And following what comes naturally, it's a lot easier to put down more pavement than to move, let alone burrow through, hillsides. But natural topography makes us change direction more frequently, and therefore accidents are more likely. And they waste time and gas and tires and patience, resources of all kinds. That's the physical landscape we live in. The social, political, and moral landscape is something else. That landscape is not so much formed by glaciers and volcanoes, by plate tectonics, where erosions is formed by the actions, large and small, of the inhabitants, both locally and on a larger scale. But there are the same kind of dynamics at work in that landscape too, with far greater human consequences. Recent events across our country and in the world have painfully reminded us how far from straight and level our societal, political, and economic landscape really is. We have had, in the wake of incidents from Missouri to New York to Arizona to California, and in a plethora of places on most continents, a renewed sense that disparities of individual freedoms and opportunities lie at the roots of many conflicts. Especially in the wake of strife in the Middle East, Europe, and Indonesia, we have a renewed sense that national politics, guising as religious aspirations, are in stress. The local causes of this unrest vary. Some people feel that others are advantaged by their society while they are not. Some feel that while they are losing control of how they want to live their lives, others have the freedom to do as they please. For all, there's a sense that things have changed and they don't like it, or they haven't changed and they don't like it. I don't need to specify individual circumstances. Even a casual reading of the news will get you that. We know that for many people, these trouble spots are the perception that others are playing on an uneven field. People are playing by different sets of rules. People are not getting the share of the pie they believe they're entitled to. It also involves that problem with standards and authority that I've referred to in sermons previously. Many times, the anger and frustration stay just below the surface, but bubble through when an incident reminds them of their situation. When do things change? The usual answer is in the fullness of time, which is like when PennDOT gets to it. The trouble is, for those people stuck in nasty traffic jams or in deep emotional, social, political, or economic valleys, the clock is already run. This is the time when we reflect just a little on the events of the year past in the life of this community of faith. It's also a time when we might consider how we'll respond to challenges ahead. And maybe we need to think a little about making a few roads just a bit straighter, a few rough places a little smoother, and not just for our own benefit, for our own traveling ease, but for the sake of the world Christ died to save. Back in Jesus' time, they had, and the New Testament speaks of, Samaritans and Jews. The Samaritans were originally from the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, but had split about the time of David and Solomon, and later during the Babylonian exile, they were primarily the ones who stayed behind in the land. Thus, they claimed to preserve the true ancient religion of the Israelites, alleged to be corrupted by the Judaism of the returning exiles. The major issue was the location of the chosen place to worship God: Jerusalem, according to the Jewish faith, or Mount Gerizim, according to the Samaritans. But this difference of opinion wasn't tolerable, and the ascendant Jews marginalized their northwestern brothers and sisters. Here's one story. Jesus was leaving Judea and heading north into Galilee, and therefore passing through Samaria. He stops about noon in a town called Sychar and sits on the edge of the local well. Here's the story. A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." His disciples had gone to the city to buy food. The woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria?" Jews don't share things in common with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is asking you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have no bucket and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us this well with his sons and his flocks to drink from it?" Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But those who drink of the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give them will become in them a spring of water gushing up into eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I may never be thirsty or have to keep coming here to draw." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now here when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father seeks such as these to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth." The woman said to him, "I know that Messiah is coming. When he comes, he will proclaim all things to us." Jesus said to her, "I am he, the one who is speaking to you." What Jesus had done and is still doing is to raise our perception that we are all, in fact, much more alike than we are different. Despite our national origins, our races, our ethnicities, Jesus was announcing that there's no longer time for these historically important questions to get in the way of faith in God and love of our neighbor. Well, now consider our local ancestors. the Scots. Well, one of the Regent's ancestors anyhow. Despite a turbulent early history, which makes for terrific motion pictures, but is lousy to live with, within a little more than 100 years after the unification under the United Kingdom, the Scots had almost completely reversed their natural fortunes. They rose from a violent backwater to leadership in matters of politics, social policy, intellectual and technological innovations, and economics. But, and here's the connection, at the real base of it all is the influence of the Reformation theologian John Knox and the Presbyterian Church. They laid the spiritual foundation not only for the rebirth of that rugged land and its people, but also for many modern ideas of democratic government. John Knox, disciple of John Calvin, wanted to turn the Scots into God's chosen people and Scotland into the New Jerusalem, and he almost did it. His followers instituted the Protestant Reformation, in that land anyhow, even at some cost to the peace. And while there were some social rules we might consider oppressive, including Sabbath restrictions and prohibiting gambling, card playing, and dancing, what people got in return for this was the realization that they now had direct access to the divine. On Sundays, the churches were full of people singing songs, and the Lord's Supper became a community festival. John Knox himself is said to have presided over one Sunday communion service, where the congregation consumed over 8½ gallons of good red wine. 8½ gallons, a sip at a time. It's a lot of people. Feeling much more, therefore, that the church was their community, parishioners took care of the sick, the widowed, and the orphans. They provided dowries for poor girls, and they found a great sense of joy in their celebration of God's love for them. People, individuals were raised up. Divine power resided in government, yes, but not in kings or nobles or even the clergy. It resided in God's people. This was a new view of politics, popular sovereignty at a national level. And their new right to at last possess and read the Holy Scriptures led to a desire to do so, which led to a need to be able to read, which led to general and well-supported systems of local free education and rising literacy. And people not only read the Bible, but more other secular works, and a veritable literary explosion ensued, to where almost every house had books and every hamlet a library. The enthusiasm for education made possible advances in many other areas, encouraging many people to do things they only dreamed of. And it all started with a revolution in spirit, an apprehension of God's direct, unmediated concern for individuals. It's this spiritual legacy we all share and needs maintain. But friends, freedom and the obligation to sustain a community of faith is always just a generation away from extinction. Regress to dogmatic formulations and closed minds is always nibbling at our heels. Solomon, for one, wrote of the value of a human being that started way back at creation. But sin having entered the world by the time we get to the era of the prophets, we had the railing at how devalued people had become. Lamentations 4. How the gold has grown dim, how the pure gold is changed. The sacred stones lie scattered at the head of every street. The precious children of Zion, worth their weight in fine gold, how they are reckoned as earthen pots, the work of a potter's hands. Even the jackals offer the breast and nurse their young, but my people has become cruel, like the ostriches in the wilderness. So, the timing of this sermon is not completely accidental. Today, Scots observe Robbie Burns Day, an occasion to honor the patriot and the bard, To give thanks for all good things Scottish, including the haggis. The party I attended was last night, and the brave wore kilts. The theological anthropology of the Scots during these enlightened centuries is very nicely summarized in one of Burns' more noted poems. Sometimes it's listed by its first line, other times by the famous line, "A man's a man for all that." It was originally a song, first published in 1799. For Burns, it's the quality of one's inner self, one's religious zeal, one's moral and intellectual integrity that makes all the difference. And as this spiritual maturity develops, it will bring about, he was convinced, the eventual and general realization of our common humanity. Burns wrote this, don't worry about the vocabulary. Is there for honest poverty that hangs his head and all that? The coward slave we pass him by, we dare be poor for all that. And all that, our toils obscure and all that. The rank is but the guinea stamp. Man is the goal for all that. What though on hamely fare we dine, we're hot and grey and all that? Give fools their silks and knaves their wine. A man's a man for all that. For all that and all that, their tinsel show and all that. The honest man, though e'er sae poor, is king of men for all that. See yon barkie called a lord, who struts and stares and all that. Though hundreds worship at his word, he's but a coof for all that. For all that and all that, his ribbon, star and all that. The man, though independent mind, he looks and laughs at all that. A prince can make a belted knight, a marquis duke, and all that. But an honest man's a boon his might. Good faith, he mauna fall of that. For all that and all that, their dignities and all that, the pith o' sense and pride o' worth, are higher